Welcome, Scott, to my YouTube channel. Scott is an Aussie. We met through Facebook, and I've been wanting to interview him, and our schedules are kind of all over the place because I'm in Sweden, he's in Australia, and finally we had the time to connect. So I'm so grateful to have him on. We had such a great conversation, but before I hit record, and I actually don't know how the Jehovah's Witnesses came into his life. So I'm so eager to hear the story. I've heard so much about him. So without further ado, Scott, how did the Jehovah's Witnesses come into your life? And you can go on and talk about that now.
Will do. Look, hey, how you going, Vivian? Before I do start, and I said it to you before, thank you for what you do. It is really wonderful, and I'm sure, as everyone does, they appreciate it. So, how did the
Thank you.
witnesses come into my story? Look, I was adopted from just after birth, and my mother at the time, and still is a Jehovah's Witness, was a Jehovah's Witness. So I'm sort of a ring-in bloody second generation, if you will. And I grew up in the religion. So my mum it was very much in the 70s, took the role of bringing up the child, and dad went out and worked. So I went to every meeting. I was there Sundays. My spines are really good because I did a lot of walking, doing witnessing, and and things like that. And so I grew up in the witness organisation through what was it, 1975, and everyone was still alive after that, and right through till I left at about 13 and a half, 14. So yeah.
Okay, so you grew up in the religion. Both of your parents were witnesses, or was it just your mom that was a witness?
No, just my mum. Dad was, I think he's an Anglican, and look, he
Okay.
wasn't practicing. He was a sawmiller a truck driver. So yeah, that's two really different worlds. Again, it was the dynamic was very much the wife stayed at home, and the dad went out to work in that 70s regime, and so that's how it worked. And dad was really actually quite a bit like I am, like as I said to you during our talk, I served the country because I was in the military, and I always stand by that. I serve the country so people can believe what they like. And one of the things Dad did say to me, you've got to have some belief, son. That was one thing that he said to me that I never really, I suppose, got until probably a bit older now.
And your mom, was she a witness before she adopted you? Did she get
Yes.
baptized before?
So,
Okay, she did. Okay.
and she actually, they had some problems with children, and they'd lost some children prior to me being adopted, and again, she had been studying, I think, since the mid 60s. So yeah, she was a witness, sort of a baptized witness at that time.
Okay, so you were raised in that situation, and I know you said you left at like 13, 14. So obviously you're never baptized. What made you decide that this religion wasn't for you? I know you said your dad made you or said to you that you should have some kind of belief. What made you say this religion is not for me and decide not to follow your mom's footsteps?
So to expand, and I suppose I should start it where, as I grew up, right, and through my early years, 4 and 5, 6, 7, 8, I was very much the zealous little witness, which, pardon me, in hindsight, I look back, it was really horrible. I was very judgmental of my non-believing father, and that was literally, I suppose, promoted. You know what I mean? It wasn't encouraged. Um, and so through those sort of early years, I was, at the meetings, I'd be up and giving talks and all that sort of stuff. And as I sort of grew older, about the 12, 13 mark, I started to have some questions. And there was one particular incident, where I was outside, and at this time I was about 13 and a half, and a disfellowshipped young lady turned up. And I was telling you earlier, all these other witness children were out there, and were so judgmental, and literally were talking and oh, snigger, 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 And I just went, wow, they're just so judgmental. And I went and talked to this girl, said, hey, how you going, because she's a human being. And it was sort of at that point, and a number of other things just that didn't gel with me, And I saw there was more to life outside. It was like, wow, this can't be it, It just, and so I started to really push back a little bit, to the point when I was about 14 and a half, 15. I actually said to my mother, I'm not going anymore. And she's like, what? And I'm going, no, I'm not going anymore. I refuse to be a hypocrite. Because at 15, I was started to drink. I was smoking at that time, and I just said, I can't be a hypocrite. I refuse to. As it flowed on, when I started going to the pubs and clubs and all the rest of it, next minute you see all the little elders' kids there, and I'm they're all going, oh my God, don't tell your mother. I'm going, of course I won't tell your mother, you clowns. But it showed, again, the reason I got out, because they were just so shallow in how they viewed things. They weren't realistic, I suppose, is the best way of putting it. And so, yeah, I left, and I left school, went into a sawmill. I worked in a sawmill. I worked in a nightclub as a bouncer. I got married, and I got married. Leanne and I were married at 20. She was 23, so I was fairly young. But as I said, I'd been out working since I was about 15 and a half anyway, so it was sort of, and really left the religion behind at that stage. It was sort of like, yeah, right. Mum kept on with her thing, but I had my own life. And then I joined the army, and that was a bit of a roller coaster ride itself for both Leanne and I. I loved it, but again, it
So
brought challenges.
I was going to bring us back to, you were 20 years old, and your wife was 23 when you guys got married. At what age did you then join the army?
Actually, it was 10 months after I got married. So what
Oh,
happened? Um, like as I grew up, my relationship with my dad and within the family had been strained. Would be the best way of putting it. And it was in that era, and in this family unit, it was very much about proving yourself all the time. And I ended up going back and working with in my father's company. I was a daddy's boy. And my self esteem was really, really low, which I think partly was due to me not having a direction, but also I think you do, a lot of people that have grown up in the witness organisation and things like that, they tend to have a little bit of an identity crisis, just because you don't get to, I think, fully understand yourself. So
absolutely.
yeah, here I am at a young 20-year-old, and I just turned into a bit of a slob. And I'm sitting there watching TV one day and saw an ad for the army. I was not going to do that. And my wife got home, and her mother was ex-army, which is funny. So, and her sister, she's got, oh, why not? So I joined. Yeah, look, there was again, that was very much, because it takes a while to get in. Attitude. Oh, didn't you get in? Sort of attitude. And I was like, oh yeah, I've been accepted. I go leave on this date. Even to the point that there was a bet made against me that I'd be back in a week or so, which $100 changed hands because I didn't. I love the military, and so yeah, it was joining the military was probably the greatest step as far as my development, because I literally got away from the family business. I got away from costs, the small country town, and went and explored the world. And I was very lucky in the military. I travelled overseas a number of times. I travelled the UK, Malaysia. I spent 4 months over there in the jungles. That was a scream. Um, and as I was saying earlier, I went to Canada. I deployed to Bosnia in '97. Then by that time, my wife and I, we lived parallel lives at that time because I was away so much, and like most military families. And I'll never forget when I told her I was going to Bosnia. She was like, "Oh yeah, that's what you do for a living." But she didn't bat an eyelid because she was literally desensitized to that military life. It was shortly after I got back, and then she around that time she started to study with an old lady, because the witnesses called all the time in the army barracks. It was hilarious, like in the housing and that, and started to study. And because she had, sort of with mum and that had a bit of an idea, and she had a bit of a urge to explore the Bible, um, and so that sort of come at that time and fill the gap, you know.
How many years were you serving in the Army?
8.5 years.
Okay, so this brought you close to 30 years old. And at what point did your wife join the religion? So you were serving, you were away constantly. This woman
Yep.
knocked on the door. She actually, so interesting that the witnesses were all over
Oh
the
yeah.
the grounds of the Army veterans' wives and all this stuff. Not surprised. Perfect,
No.
perfect territory for vulnerable people.
Exactly.
That's exact. Oh my goodness! If you could, that's a landmine for picking up new witnesses. So here's this
Exactly.
old and an older woman, which is perfect for your wife. She sees
Yep.
kind of this motherly figure and so much like, yeah, I can imagine it was very easy for your wife to fall into that prey, being at home, being alone, and just having this love from this attention from this older woman. So this older woman comes to the door. She preaches to your wife, and then like at how old was your wife? Was 23 when she got baptized. So where does this
No,
fall
no. But
in
we got
into the,
married. So
I'm sorry,
so Leanne,
when she got baptized? So at what point was she picking up on the witnesses at this point?
so I was medically discharged from the military in December
Mm.
'99, and we moved back home. And she continued to study when she got back here. And it was early 2000s that she got baptized. I actually went um, because, as much as if I agreed or not is irrelevant, that was her choice. And I'm very big on supporting my family, whatever choice they make. And
Well,
I
I'm
actually
sorry,
cried.
where were you living when your mom got recruited? Or I'm sorry, not your mom, your wife, Leanne.
So we were living in Sydney, and then
Okay,
we moved back home here to Coss.
got it.
And
Okay.
so they had one of the, I think, the district assembly, and Leanne got baptized. And yeah, so I went along, and I actually cried, because and so one of the ladies I knew just, oh, what are you crying for? It's wonderful. I go, no, I've lost my wife. And it was sort of, yeah, it was one of those times I was really torn, probably the best way of putting it. As much as I wanted to support my wife, it wasn't something that I thought was productive. But that it is what it is. And we went, and look, Leanne, the reality is Leanne was extremely good at managing our marriage and life and her belief. And I really take my hat off to her, because she really, and look, I made sure, I always have said to her and to my mum, I'd always make sure they got to wherever they had to go. Because my purpose was not to feed them or to stop them believing what they believed in. And so, yeah, that was early 2000s. She got baptized. Um, and yeah, we plodded along, and again, my son, um, got in, and he got baptized sometime after. I can't even remember. Again, I wasn't able to get to that, but he
I'm
then,
going to stop you again. I'm curious. So you
yep.
got really emotional when your wife got baptized. Did she see your reaction and did she understand?
Afterwards,
Did you have a conversation around that?
not really. And it was one of
Okay.
those occasions. It was probably just best left alone. She knew my
Mm,
views.
mm.
We'd talked in the past about it, and she knew my views. And but as I said earlier, I stood by that statement of, hey, if you do what you want to do, I'm not going to tell you what to believe. Um, and look, I even stand by that now. And I said it earlier to you that I am a great believer that our freedoms that we have in our society, people can believe what they like. The problem is when they step over the line and start to disrupt your family, and that's when later on in things I got probably a little bit more involved and
Okay.
discussed
And
matters.
I completely understand. And then your son comes along.
Yeah.
And are you approving of her raising your son as a Jehovah's Witness, or was that something that also you just didn't really get involved in?
I don't know about approving, but again, it was that it was at that stage. I didn't, because I'd grown up like that. It sort of hadn't clicked. Um, and by the time it sort of hit me in the face, it was probably too late. But at the same time, I was like, oh, yep. I was very I was very conscious of not imposing my views, at the same time, like you look at my head, I mean, I'm pretty good at giving my views, if you know what I mean. So that they all knew what I thought and what I thought, but at the same time, I encouraged him to make his own decisions, um, and that was, I think, really important.
Okay, so he grows up and he gets baptized, correct?
Yep,
And how old is he when he gets baptized, and what are your thoughts around that?
he was about 16 at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, look, that's one thing I do disagree with, and that there's a huge amount of media out there on YouTube and everywhere else, about how young people are allowed to get baptized. And I, as a personal view, I think that's just ridiculous. You don't know what you're going to do even at 18, let alone, and if I'm, you know, like 30, here we were, and I'll be back, and like you start to understand a bit about life. But that being said, too, you encourage your children, um, and if they are doing well in something or they enjoy it, it's one of those things. Well, okay, it's not creating a problem. And as I said, the only time I sort of got involved was when it became a problem, because the decisions were made that weren't in line with what they believed, and there was sort of consequences, and away it goes.
And so that happened. You kind of just
Yes.
let it be. And then now bring us to the point where we had talked about before this conversation, the situation that happened with your son.
So during that time, it's funny probably to expand on that, because I'd grown up in it. It was really funny. And the standing joke in our house was, "I know your Jedi ways." I say it to my mother all the time. So I'm trained in the Jedi arts, and so I'm pretty good at arguing the point on certain things. Now, during all of this too, I've educated myself. I've got a certificate in Christianity. I've studied and I said about the Chaldean comment you made before. I've actually studied ancient, you know, um, sort of cultures such as Egyptology, Sumerian, all that sort of stuff. So one of the great things about my son, certainly, my wife didn't like discussing stuff with me, because I am fairly full on. But when my son, he liked to go hard, and so he would argue the point, and we would go for it and have a really good conversation. Um, and as I said, down the track, he ended up getting this fellowship, and I was like, okay, and that caused a great deal of unrest. That mum was upset, and obviously his, James's mum, my wife, was upset. So I sat there with him and said, okay, well, what do you want to do? Like, how do we address this? Um, and him and I sat together and we worked out a plan, and I helped him with his appeal. Um, and, he went to the appeal, and I actually went to the appeal with him, and they knocked him back. And it was like, oh my God. And honestly, the kangaroo court judicial system of the witnesses is just so, how do you put it? Look, wrong was probably the best word, because of how it's structured, and having and being a, I studied military law. That was part of it, being a corporal. I've studied criminology, and why I bring that up is that it is so flawed in so many levels of law and practice. You said so. Again, I went in and had a bit of a chat to the six elders that were there, and let them know that I'd be frequenting now, because I'd promised my son that, if it didn't go the right way, that I'd be coming to the meetings with him as a show of support, because I believed he was in the right, and that again had some heads turning and a few people like, oh my God. But again, it was very much about showing support. And during that time, in the initial couple of times we went. It was just him and I at the back, and the next minute Mum's sitting with us, and then the next minute we're sitting there. There's a lot of support given to him, by us, and that was really important, because again, my wife didn't agree with it either, and neither did my mother, for that matter. And I think a number of people didn't. But again, I addressed them pretty harshly, I've got to say, and I think it was warranted because of just how, again, flawed that procedure was. And during the conversation, I said to them, I've asked to talk to your circuit overseer, and I literally called them gutless and told them, it's ridiculous. As I said to you, the circuit officer I did get to speak to, and he came to my house, and I rate the man, he obviously got some homework, and I did. I made it clear to him when he sat down, as I said to you, I said, you got some sort of balls, you got some guts, mate, because I'm ex-military, I'm qualified in unarmed combat, all this sort of stuff, and you're going to sit here and sort of take me on, and that was a really interesting conversation, because my opening line to him was, if my son had have committed suicide, whose house was I getting? And he took it in his stride, and we discussed things. Did anything come out of it positively? I don't know. But I suppose I was heard, and that's all I really wanted. I wanted it to be very clear to him and to the hierarchy of that organisation that, I thought that they were wrong. And so consequently, my son got reinstated, and then he started to fade. He started to realise and see cracks. One of the best things that happened when he was disfellowship, he started to explore different viewpoints. And I, encouraged us, no, go to town, mate, and so those cracks started to appear, and he started to move away. Look, I'm not going to say he was innocent too. Look, he'd text his friends and challenge their beliefs at times. I'm like, you don't need to poke the bear.
Good for him, though. Good for him for standing up for himself and like questioning the beliefs. That's awesome.
Exactly, and it was like, as I said, we were able to reconnect then, because one of the things that I did feel that him and I were sitting on the same path as my father and I was very judgmental. And I said earlier, if I could turn back time, that famous song, that's one of those things that I look back at how judgmental I was, and how, when I shouldn't have been, I had no right to be, is the best way of putting it, because I didn't understand the situation. And so it was really wonderful to see James, my son, move out, and stuff. And then, as that progressed, my wife started to fade a bit. And I'll never forget, she said to me one day, we were walking, and she said, I think James is an apostate. And I've gone, yeah. I said, he might well be. And I said, you know what an apostate is? And rattled off the typical witness crap. And I said, no, an apostate is someone that just changes religion. I said, there's no, it's not bad, it's not good, it's just fact. And again, I think she started to see the cracks appearing as well. And I don't know exactly what it was, but she just wasn't feeling it, I don't think. I think there was that what had happened with our son really took the shine off her because of how unjust it was. And if it's one thing that, even my psych says, like, I've got a huge moral compass, and I think Leanne's the same, and things that are unjust burr us, and I think that was the start, and as I brought up, and I've got to do it because, and say, I was in a position when my wife started to fade that I was out of my depth. And I ended up, I forget the name of the organisation. I sent them an email and was contacted by Kim Silvio. And Kim, big shout out to you out there if you're listening to this. I owe you my marriage. I really do. And I have to say that because, she was instrumental in coaching me on how to address certain things because I didn't know how. Here I was, a spouse of a witness, a son, a spouse, a father, and I just didn't know how to do this. It was like, wow. And so I did. I reached out for help, and as I said, Kim was instrumental in allowing me to giving me the information to facilitate and help my wife.
Wow. I'm so intrigued because this point, your wife is fading, and your son has faded, and now God's curious about other religions. Um, and I know that you said at this point too, your marriage was kind of struggling and you reached out to Kim. So what advice did Kim give you that kind of, as you said, saved your marriage? If you can kind of just
Yeah.
talk
So
about
when
that a
I
little
say
bit.
save my marriage, the reason it saved it is because my wife was in a transitional time. I was like didn't know how to act in that, and so when I spoke to Kim, it was simple things about how to react to certain things, um, or things to say in response. So if something come up, well, luckily enough for me, the the what do you call it, Royal Commission was being held in Australia, and I'd actually been put on that, and I had gone through it all. So I was able to discuss that as well and bring that up in conversation, more so to protect my wife, so that she was aware of it, so she didn't get blindsided of it, with it. And so when Kim, I'd bring up and I'd go, oh yeah, this has happened. And she, oh, good, right, we need to do this. And as I said, it was just these little subtle things. And as I said, when I say saving my marriage, it's because I was so out of my depth that I just didn't know what to say or do. And it would always blow up in an argument usually because I was just so out of my depth. And she was able to guide me through those, if something was said, how to react, and sometimes how not to react. That was sometimes the key, is to just take it in my stride and go, yeah, okay. Because it might be that she'd say something that was, leading towards going back, and I'd be like, ah, hit the panic button, you know what I mean? And so that in itself helped me a great deal, in turn helping my wife, and helping our family, because the during this time too, my son got married, and his wife's outstanding. She's just an adorable little darling, and as we become this group of four people, and started to work together so well. The further my wife got away from it, the closer we all got. And that was obvious. And I think one of the things my wife said, is that, why would I want to live forever if I can't have my family with me? And I actually say that to people. So my wife chose, in my book, I'm writing a book, and one of the chapters is, my wife, what an amazing woman. She chose a family over eternal life. And that's the reality. She made that choice.
That's beautiful. Very little families are together for that reason, or for living forever together. I think, if anything, it's way more common for the Jehovah's Witnesses to break families apart than to bring them together.
Agreed.
So I think it's absolutely amazing. How long ago was it that she was fading? I know you said your son got married. What year did your son get married?
Well, he's been married 2 years now, so it's at
Okay, so it
2020.
was during the
Yeah,
pandemic.
okay.
It was
Yes,
during the pandemic that she decided not to go to the meetings anymore. It was maybe like in the height of the pandemic. Okay, wow.
correct. So the Zoom
Incredible.
meetings, right? And
Perfect. I
and
mean, what a
yeah,
great time to fade. What a great
yeah.
time to,
Look,
like, you're not around people. It's a great time. I think a lot of people were fading during that time because they
agreed.
were staying at home a lot and they got to be with their family and they got to be on the internet, and there's all kinds of
Oh, and that being with your family and just enjoying it, and you know what? This is the I can't say enough about my wife. Like, she still has friends that she talks to, and they still accept her. And I think that's an attestament to her, how what a wonderful person she is. If you know what I mean, like, that they still want to be friends with. They still want to make sure she's, and that's really nice.
How has the last 2 years been to have a non-witness wife? Where is she when it comes to, let's say, celebrating the holidays or celebrating her birthdays? Is that something that she's curious about? Is she accepting of that? Like, where is she when it comes to those things?
Actually today is my son's birthday.
Wow.
so, but look, that has now become a thing again. Like we went to a mum's birthday party the other day. The, so we as a family, um, we're not very. I mean, like as far as Christmas and birthdays, we'll have a birthday dinner. We always have. Um, but we're not super celebration people. And Christmas is sort of like, yeah, the commercial side of it. Sort of, it's like, it's a good time for us all to get together and have fun. And that, in saying that, she's had the opportunity to be a part of her family again because she has four brothers, a brother and three sisters. So she again is able to enjoy stuff in in that arena, and that's sort of flourished. I suppose it's become a thing again, which is really nice.
That's so beautiful. I'm curious as well, how has she made any comments about this transition and how you've been toward her and like where she is now versus when she was wrapped up in the organization? Has she kind of talked about that at all?
Not really. Look, I will often check in. We Leanne and I have a really good relationship. She is very attuned to my mental health, and if she notices I'm struggling, she will check in with me straight away. How you going? What's wrong? I'm sort of similar. I will just periodically check in and say, how you going? Hey, like, how's that going? Or, it might be around this time. How you coping with that? Or has anyone contacted you? I'll often ask, has anyone contacted you? I'd be interested to see if this if this pokes a bear, but anyway. Um, I personally don't think they'd be game to come after any of my family, and neither should they. We've not done anything that we shouldn't, and this is my story, if you know what I mean. Um, but yeah, that conversation has been in just in passing. We might be driving somewhere and check in with her and see how she's going, because it is a big step, and um, when luckily my son, he educated me even in the intricacies, a lot of the you know stuff that I'd really not taken a great deal of notice of, and so that was positive because it's allowed me to understand and get a bit of a feel. Again, my research, I make sure I keep up to date with what's going on, and that's allowed me to be across stuff, if you will, that I can converse and just check in and make sure that she's not there's you know um, no hesitation there on her part, I suppose. I've asked too. Is there anything you miss? And she says sometimes the friends and that, but then she's in touch with the friends who she wants to be in touch with.
I think that it just takes time to build up friends. And so they got her at the most vulnerable time when you were away and serving. And now she's much more mentally and physically sustainable. You guys are
Oh,
planted in a home, you guys are near retire or you're pretty much retired. Your son is
yes.
married. So she's just better overall. And I think this is a
Oh,
great
without a
time
doubt.
for her to leave the organization because at one time I feel like she needed the organization for that comfort and
Yep.
now she doesn't need it anymore. So she outgrew it in a sense, and that's a beautiful thing too. Like she belonged at one point and now she doesn't belong. And I think every
Very much
person
so.
that's in the organization, there is either a perfect time to leave or maybe it's just time for you to keep going, like we had talked about before. And there's some people that
Yeah.
are just happy in the organization and we have to respect them for having that choice and just love them for who they are, as you have with your mom.
Yes.
And your son, I love the fact that he got married. And does his wife, does she understand the Jehovah's Witness? Like where did he meet her, and does she understand the Jehovah's Witness life that he had before?
So they met at work, where they worked in a department store. His wife is very protective, and that's been really wonderful. Look, her and I, have and we talk regularly about it, because he still has things crop up. you know, pop up and things. So she has educated herself, which has been really wonderful because it's allowed her to understand reactions and stuff like that. Does she get the shit sometimes? Yeah, she does. And so do I. You know, there's some things that really annoy us. You know, and whether it be on a personal level or whatever the case may be. But at the same time, she takes it in stride and goes, okay, let's you know, let's what do you call it? Um, you know, navigate through it and come out with a good outcome. And that's really important too. You know, she's been really supportive of him, which is wonderful too. You know, and look, they're actually building a house on our property, so they're literally 50 metres from us. They move in I think 12 days or something. You know, so which is really wonderful.
That's awesome. What a great ending to this story. So I loved your story, and I would love for you to share or say anything that you feel like you missed out on, that you feel like you want to share with the audience. Is there anything?
Look, to close, there's probably first of all, thank you for the opportunity, because this is part of my therapy and part of my sort of closure. You know, I've got to thank, you know, as I said, I shared that to Kim earlier. I cannot thank that lady enough for helping me negotiate something that I was so out of my depth with. Um, and to all the spouses out there, there is hope. And what I mean by that is, you know, don't give up. There is hope, and um, the best thing you can do is be understanding, be supportive, but let them know that there is something else out there, you know, and just give your spouse all the love you can and show them that they're worth it.
Beautiful, beautiful words. The amount of compassion and support that you had for your wife, I feel like that is really what she needed to deal with this transition. So thank you
Agreed.
again, Scott, for sharing this beautiful story. And thank you for watching this interview.